Welcome to the Listening Lounge, where we unravel stories and ignite conversations, one ear at a time. Here's your host of the Listening Lounge, Derek Dunn.
Hi, and welcome to the Listening Lounge, where we unravel stories and ignite conversations, one ear at a time. I'm Derek Dunn, your host. Thanks for tuning in. The Listening Lounge can be found on the following YouTube channels: RJ on the Air and the Listening Lounge podcast. You can also find the podcast on Spotify, and there's also a Facebook page up called the Listening Lounge. I encourage you to like the page as well for updates about upcoming podcasts and even some podcast clips as well. Now, because this is the first episode of the podcast, I like to go over a few details of what this podcast will be like. This podcast is going to be like a boat without a rudder. It may be entertaining, interesting, educational, and yes, emotional. The topics can vary and cover a multitude of areas like sports, news, weather, culture, all that. This podcast is geared towards being family friendly, as a variety of ages can listen to it, and lastly, it is pre-recorded unless otherwise noted. So with all that being said, my first guest of the Listening Lounge is a guy I have known for over 20 years. He was my junior high basketball coach for a couple of years during my days at Center Street School in Fairfield, Illinois, which is my hometown. Fast forward to the present day, he is the assistant softball coach for the Frontier Community College Bobcats softball team. I call him coach, yet he is more than a coach to me in my eyes. He is a good friend, and his baseball stories are incredible. And yes, we will be talking some baseball here, which may take up the majority of the conversation, but you know what? That's fine. I mean, he's got plenty of baseball stories that I think you guys will find very fascinating. So please welcome Marty Slover. He just walked into the Listening Lounge. Coach, thanks for joining me here. I said in the intro that this podcast is like a rudderless boat, but you actually said it was a rudderless duck, and I'm starting to hear some quacking going on, so we better tell those ducks to be quiet in the background. But, Coach, thanks very much for joining me here. It's always good talking to you, and I want to start off, we had a phone conversation about a week ago last week, and this is where when I heard that Whitey Herzog died. He died, just a refresh here, he died on April 15th at the age of 92. And I had a feeling that you had some connection to Whitey. I mean, and you told me that you had some interaction with him. And I think for the listeners here who don't know you, who don't know Whitey Herzog and don't know the stories you have, I was wanting to know if you could share any Whitey Herzog stories that you have. So, Coach, I'm all ears here, and I've always loved listening to your stories. So, any Whitey Herzog story that comes to mind?
Well, in '87, of course, we had talked previously about the 3 millionth fan and that story and everything, and that kind of opened up, some conversation with Whitey, because now we have some common ground and some things to talk about. And I know we were being treated like royalty that day in Busch Stadium, and it was just a fun day, and kind of reflective of all of the fans at the first time that they broke 3 million. And it was really a big deal. And Whitey, knew it was a big deal, and he made it very special for us. And I know in 1988 we went down to spring training. And we were down there. Of course, I'd gone down there because I wanted to watch baseball, and it's my first spring training trip ever. And Ryan, I think at the time, was about 6, and we went down and we played. They were at St. Petersburg at Alongi Stadium, and we were down the right field line, and the Cardinals were taking batting practice. They hadn't opened up the gates yet to go inside, and there was a few people standing around, and the Wagon gate was latched, but there was a split in it, probably a good foot, big enough for a small kid to get through. So there was hitting balls and stuff down the right field line there, and there's a bunch of foul balls that were kind of rolling over there, barely off the warning track or the side warning track. And I remember Tony Pena was in the outfield, and they were shagging balls and stuff. And somebody was standing there and made a comment to Ryan, said, "Hey, you could run out there and grab a ball," So before I knew it, Ryan runs out and he grabs the ball and comes back. And so that was pretty easy. So we waited a little while longer, and there was a couple more balls out there, and he ran out and he got those. Well, then Tony Pena he sees it, and he's laughing and pointing, at him, and saying something in Spanish, and I couldn't understand what he was saying, but he was laughing. It wasn't a big deal or anything, and Ryan ended up with probably 4 or 5 baseballs, and we kind of stood there, and get ready to go in, wait for the gates to open so we could go into the game and everything. Just kind of stood there, and pretty soon down the right field line, a door opened up, and a couple players came out, and behind them was Whitey, and here he's walking. They're all walking our way, and Whitey's coming over there, and I'm thinking, oh, great, we got a chance to talk to him. He comes over and he goes, "Where's that ball bandit at?" And he's laughing and he's pointing toward Ryan. And he comes over there, and we get to talk to him a little bit, and we reminded him about the 3 millionth fan, and he remembered, and then we struck up a conversation and started talking about things and everything, and he signed a baseball for Ryan, and just had a really great conversation there. Super nice guy. I mean, Whitey was so the interactions that I had with him, probably 4 or 5 interactions from that point forward, and every time it was, he was just always about smiling, and he was always laughing, and just he loved talking about baseball. And we spent so much time, and he had a little bit of time that day from batting practice to go down, and had just a few minutes, and he spent some time just talking to us. And there's like 3 or 4 people around us and everything. And they found out, about the 3 millionth fan too, and they thought that was a really big deal. And that just was an opportunity, that pure luck, and we actually got a chance to open up some doors for us as far as communicating with Whitey and everything.
It's amazing how you remember that one encounter with Whitey, and just by reading, a guy of high character, great coach, and he was known for the style of Whiteyball. And Coach, about Whiteyball, speed, not so much power, but just being able to get hit after hit. Do you see Whiteyball being used today in today's game, or do you think it's a thing of the past?
The last team that really used Whiteyball to a certain extent was Kansas City. The Royals back, I think the last time they won a World Series, I can't remember the year, 95, 6, something like that. I don't remember. The last team after that, I think maybe in the 2000s. They were the last team to really go out there and to run and manufacture runs and everything. And they've kind of got away from that. Now it's about launch angle and trying to get the ball in the air and, hit home runs. And, people that did not watch Whiteyball, and that was exciting. I mean, I would like to see it come back, because back then I've seen when Vince Coleman or Willie McGee or Ozzie Smith were on base, I've seen pitchers throw over to first base 12, 15 times. And the opposition hated it, but the Cardinal fans just ate it up because they knew what was going to happen. And I was at a game. Coleman was up, and he got up, and it was in it was an extra innings, and he got a base hit. No, I take that back. They walked him. The very first pitch, he stole second. The next pitch, he stole third. And within 3 pitches, or the 2 pitches, he's standing on third base with nobody out. So it forced the opposition. I think they were playing the Mets at the time. They had to walk the bases loaded, and the next guy gets up and hits a sac fly, and they won the ball game. So they won the ball game on 1 hit, and it wasn't a home run. He stole second, he stole third, he scored on a sac fly. So it's a really exciting brand of baseball, because back then everybody in the whole park knew when Coleman or even McGee or Ozzie got on, there was a good chance they were going to steal a base. And the Cardinals, I think, were last in the division in home runs, but they were first in baseball in stolen bases. And I remember Whitey saying one time, he made this comment. He said that team opposition was getting frustrated with him because he's stealing bases and he was up by 3 runs. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, if you quit trying to hit home runs, we'll quit stealing bases. And that made a lot of sense.
Yeah, that was Whitey. He was a straight shooter. And what I mean by Whiteyball, for those of you who are wondering, is that Whiteyball concentrated on pitching, speed, and defense to win games rather than home runs. And I think that's an exciting type of baseball to watch because speed kills. You get a pitcher that can shut down the opposition, and then as long as you have good defense, because I enjoy watching defense as much as I do offense, whether it's basketball, football, baseball, softball, Whiteyball. Just, I mean, I read more and more about it. It's like, man, I would love to see that kind of baseball.
It was fun. I mean, it was a fun time. It really was. And, like I said, that year, that era, from '87 to '89, it was just a really, really. Well, actually, before that, in the '80s, and Whiteyball came here in '81 and didn't leave till probably around '80, '88 or so when he left. But it was a fun baseball. I mean, it really was. It was real baseball. I saw him. He was always doing unorthodox things, and I saw him. I think it was in '85. Todd Worrell was pitching. Might have been '87. Anyway, Worrell was pitching, and we had Ken Daly and Todd Worrell, and we had a lefty coming up, and we were playing the Mets, and Strawberry came up, and when Strawberry had a left-handed hitter, well, he brought in Ken Daly, and everybody thought, okay, Worrell's out of the game now, so okay, we're good. No, Worrell went to right field, and he had played right field in college, and he was a pitcher. And a lot of people didn't know that. Well, Whitey knew he could do that. So he put Worrell in right field, and Daly got Strawberry out. Well, he brought Worrell back into pitch and replaced his right fielder. So he was always doing unconventional things by Major League Baseball standards, and it was really kind of fun.
It's always good to surprise the opposition. You just never know when a surprise move like that could catch everyone off guard. You could take it, for full advantage. Coach, one thing, Whitey memory, you and I were talking about prior to starting this podcast, but I found this story to be interesting. MLB Fans Incorporated. This is something that I think is a fascinating story. And could you tell our listeners here what MLB Fans Incorporated was all about? Because I know a lot of people don't even know that story.
Well, got to back up a little bit,
Oh, okay.
I'd actually bird dog scouted for a guy. His name is Jerome Alongi. We called him Mimi. Learned so much from him about scouting and even recruiting. A lot of the things that he taught me about recruiting, I learned when I was when I recruited and still do recruit at Frontier. Just learned so much about that, about people and everything. So Mimi, Mimi had scouted for a long time. He was with the Mets in '69 when they won the World Series. He'd been around for a long time, been around baseball for a long time. He was a very good businessman too, very, very sharp. But he had this idea, and one day he called me and he said, "Hey, I got something here I want to throw at you." And he said, "I got this idea," and he had generated this idea from kind of like the Green Bay Packers, which are supposedly fan-owned. Well, he wanted to start and buy a Major League Baseball team that was fan-owned, and by generating revenue. So I'm like, well, it sounds good, but maybe that's a lot of money. Well, back then they didn't have social media. Everything was done, via television or newspaper. We kind of got the thing started. He had a board of about 9 people. He had an attorney on the board. He had hired some other attorneys, and he spent a lot of his own money. And he got this thing called Major League Baseball Fans Incorporated, and it wasn't a corporation. And you could buy stock in this corporation, and the goal was to buy a professional baseball team. And people, today will think, "Oh, that's silly. That's a wild idea." And I thought the same thing until I started sitting on some of the meetings that he was having, and some of the things that he was talking about. And some of the people that were calling him they were talking about a lot of money that was coming across the table. And so I want in. I've got this number, X amount of dollars, and it was a lot of money. And Mimi had it in his mind that he wanted to buy a professional baseball team. And there were some teams that were coming up for sale at the time. I think he mentioned, and don't quote me on this, I think the Baltimore Orioles was one of the teams that he was really talking about. and he had watched the old St. Louis Browns play, and he said, "That's the old, the Orioles are the old Browns." And he said, "Wouldn't it be neat if we we could get them, And there was a couple of teams that were for sale. Well, are going to come up for sale, I should say. And Mimi had actually, he was always thinking ahead, and he had worked for as a scout under Whitey, and his goal and his dream was to buy a professional baseball team and bring Whitey in and completely gut the whole thing and start over and have him put his hand on it and run the ball club. And people look at that and go, "Oh, that was a silly idea," but it was an idea that really was gaining a lot of traction. It gained so much traction, in fact, that we got stopped pretty much dead in our tracks after about 2 years. Mimi called me one day and he goes, "We got problems." I'm like, "What?" I thought we would run out of money. He goes, "No, it's not money. We got plenty. We got money coming in. That's not the problem. Our pledges come from money coming in." He said, "That's not the problem. The problem is that Major League Baseball doesn't like this idea, and they have." I just received a cease and desist order telling me to stop. And so we got, he talked to his attorney, the attorneys, I should say, and they said, "Well, you can fight it. You can prolong and fight it." But he said, "What's going to happen is they're going to drag this out in court for so long. It's going to cost you so much money." He said, "You might win." He said, "The money that you've got to buy a ball club with," he said, "by the time this is all said and done," he said, "they're going to just drain you dry." And that was their plan, I think, all along, is to get that. But it was a great idea, and it gained a lot of traction. He had the article appeared in the New York Times, and when that article appeared in the New York Times back in 1981 or 82, I think it was, around that time frame, he got phone calls, and the lawyers were busy, and we had people from Australia and Japan and Germany calling and wanting to pledge money. They wanted in on this great idea, and it would have been something if it had actually happened. And there for a while, I thought, man, this is going to happen. This is really going to happen. And then we kind of got run into a brick wall, and that wall didn't move. And Major League Baseball pretty much put a stop to it. And but boy, it's fun. It's fun while it lasted.
And you sat in some of those meetings, and you told me that you were very impressed with the meetings and how they're being conducted.
Well, yeah, I was in awe, because I mean, here I'm just an old country boy from Orchardville, and here I am sitting here, and they're talking about buying. These guys are talking about getting money and talking about this guy and that guy and putting money out, and you're talking about a lot of money. And these business people from foreign countries and stuff, they're wanting to put forth money and having interpreters that are interpreting what they want to do. And it was just it was an awesome, awe-inspiring type of situation, that was going on there. The things that were being said and conducted. And I still got my certificate where I was going to actually, me and 8 other people were going to serve on this board, and we were going to be representative of all of the fans that had bought stock in the company and everything. Of course, Mimi was going to be president, and he knew exactly what he was going to do.
And here's the thing, too, Coach. If it came to fruition, let's say this whole thing, you didn't have that brick wall, and it became official, where would you be at today? I don't know where you would be at.
I don't know. I mean, I thought about that a lot, when it happened, when all this stuff happened. I probably would be in baseball somewhere, I mean, doing something. And I also think too that had this happened in a different era, say now when there's social media where you can get the word out, Major League Baseball might have been a little bit hesitant to really kind of put a stop to it, because they would have received a lot of backlash, I think, from the everyday working guy, because this is a fan. You have a chance to own a piece of a professional baseball club.
Yeah.
And just like, they say that the Green Bay Packers are fan owned. I'm not sure how that works in today's environment, but under the environment and the strategy that Mimi had in place, it was going to be owned by fans. You were going to have a chance to vote with your stock. Now, obviously not voting on game managers and stuff like that, that would be stuff that we would have to look at the votes, and the board would make a decision on what they wanted to do. But it was just a it was just a really, really great idea. I think if it happened today, might have been a little bit more chance for it to be successful.
And Mimi Alongi was a guy who I know you speak highly of, and you have plenty of memories of. And you also talked about the baseball strike with Mimi, and about Kansas City and all that. Can you go more in deep with that?
Well, in 1981, there was no baseball going on. Now, I will say this: Mimi was a big baseball fan, and he loved baseball. He collected baseball cards. He loved anything baseball. And in 1981, there was a convention going on of scouts, and also with a big convention, baseball convention going on. And we went out there, and on the way out, we were talking and everything. Well, Joe DiMaggio was going to be there, and I was excited because I'm going to get a chance to listen to Joe DiMaggio speak. And I thought, well, that's going to be really, really cool, So we got out there, and we go in, and we get checked into our rooms and everything. Mimi comes down. He goes, "Okay, I got our table." And I'm like, "Okay." So we go out, and we're sitting at this table, and he's actually talking to people promoting Major League Baseball Fans Incorporated. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we went out there. And he goes, "Hey, I'm going to tell you right now," he said, "we got a little special thing coming here." He said, "DiMaggio's going to be sitting pretty close to us." He said, "In fact, DiMaggio's going to be sitting right next to us." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" He goes, "No." So sure enough, we're sitting down there, and there's probably 500-600 people in this big convention hall. And there's a guy comes in, and he walks in. He says, "Hey, I was going to let you know." He said, "Mr. DiMaggio's going to be coming in here pretty soon." He said, "Feel free to make him feel welcome." He said, "You can," and he looked at our table because we were going to be sitting right next to him. In fact, I was sitting right next to Joe DiMaggio. He looked at me and goes, "You guys can talk to him about anything you want to talk to him about except Marilyn Monroe." He said he will not discuss anything that has to do with Miss Monroe. Like, okay. So he comes in, and when he comes in, the guy, I still remember to this day, he walks in, he's got on a blue suit, a red tie, and he looks like he stepped out of GQ magazine. I mean, and he walked by, he's shaking hands with people. He's just class, He comes over and looks, and he looks at me, he said, is this seat, he's kind of kidding, he goes, "Is this seat taken?" I'm like, "No, sir, it's not." So he sits down, and I'm just like, for the first 20 minutes, I'm like, what do I say? But we managed to get some questions out and talk to him a little bit, and people would come by and shake his hand, and he'd sign an autograph, and we just had a really good time, that they were there, and he was there for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, So,
gosh,
Mimi got that table. I mean, he was the one that got that table. That was him. He knew somebody there, and he got that table.
I would be just so starstruck that I wouldn't even know what to say. I wouldn't even know what questions to ask, and about the Yankees, about the Yankee greats. I don't know what you would ask him.
I remember one question I asked him. I said, I said, obviously you were probably pretty disappointed when your 56-game hitting streak got broke, and they made that play. And that play, if you probably remember, but there was a fantastic play. He hit a one-hop shot down the third base line, and the guy backhanded it, turned and swirled and threw, and he threw him out by a half a step. Well, that's ended the 56-game streak, I believe. But after that, I think he hit in 14 more straight games. The next game, he started a new streak, and he hit in 14 more straight. So I asked him, I said, "Were you pretty disappointed?" He goes, "Well," he said, "Yeah, I was." But he said, "Really?" He said, "It took a lot of pressure off of me because everybody's expecting me to hit, like, the whole season." He said, "That wasn't going to happen." But, he's just a really nice guy, and he was just so pleasant to talk to, and he took the time when people came by and talked to him, he took the time to talk to him. And the only other person I can think of that was like that I've met is Cal Ripken and Ozzie Smith. Those two guys remind me a lot of how Joe DiMaggio was. He just was very, very appreciative of what he had, and he knew that the fans appreciated him, and he wanted to give back.
Let's talk about Cal Ripken and Ozzie Smith. Since you're on both of them already.
Well, Cal Ripken, we actually went to the All-Star game in 2009. He was signing autographs. It was just a chance thing that happened, and we walked in, and he signed a ball for me, and he took pictures. He did that with everybody, though. It wasn't just me. It was everybody. Now, Ozzie, on the other hand, my youngest daughter wasn't alive at the time of the 3 millionth fan, and she's heard the stories, we've told her. So Ozzie was in St. Louis signing autographs one time, and I thought, I'll just see. I called Bria. She was going to school at SIUE, and I picked her up, and I said, we're going to go and get an autograph from Ozzie and see if we can talk to him a little bit. So went through. I had my World Series ring on to make sure I wore it. And when I set the ball down, I set it down so he saw my ring. And he looked at me, and he was kind of puzzled. And I just told him, 3 millionth fan, 87. Oh, yeah. And he lit up. So we started talking a little bit, and I said, this is my daughter, Bria. And I said, she wasn't alive at the time that happened. And I said, I told her the stories and everything. And she wanted to come by and meet you and maybe get a picture. So he said, yeah, that's fine. So Bria kind of leaned in, like he was sitting at a table, kind of leaned in across the table. And Ozzie said, oh, no. And I thought, well, he doesn't want to take the picture. That wasn't it at all. He stood up and he said, over here. And he walked over. He said, there's a background that has some brick on it. He said, this would be a much better spot to take a picture. And he got Bria next to him. He put his arm around her, and he kind of kidded with her a little bit. And he talked to her for a few minutes, and then we took a picture. And it was just like, he was just such a nice man. And I've had the opportunity to meet Ozzie several times, and every time you meet him, he's just such a nice guy.
Yeah, I think when you see him, like on, I keep wanting to say Fox Sports Midwest, but Bally Sports, and you see like social media videos of him, like on the Cardinals social media pages, and it seems like what you see on screen, social media, it seems like it translates to who he is in person. Like he's genuine, he's real.
He is. I mean, the day of the 3 millionth fan, he came over and Ryan was there. And of course, Ozzie was Ryan's idol growing up. He was a big Ozzie Smith fan, and he was just an awestruck. He was like 5 years old. He's like, here's Ozzie Smith, So Ozzie would come over and he was talking to him, and he gave him a ball and he signed it, and he just, kidding around with him and everything. And then Fred Koolman, who was the president of the Cardinals at that time, Gussie Busch was not feeling real well that day, and he wasn't able to make it. So Fred Koolman stepped in his place, and Ozzie just walked over to Koolman and he said, hey, these guys need a new car. He kind of laughed.
What?
Thinking, maybe might get a new car, So anyway, a few minutes later, Fred Koolman leaned over to me and he said, hey, I just want to let you know. Of course, they gave us everything. I mean, we got tickets and watches and, just tons of stuff they gave us. And he leaned over and he's like, hey, St. Louis is yours. He said, if there's something that you really, really want, he said, just let us know. He said, within reason, let us know what it is. And I told him, I said, Mr. Koolman, I said, I'm going to tell you what. If you guys go to the World Series this year, I said, there's something that I do want. I said, I want the ability to have a World Series ring. And he said, okay, we'll see what we can do. And, it wasn't much later, a little bit later. I mean, when they didn't win, that happened. But we were going to be in the parade. If the Cardinals had won, we were going to be in the parade. They got beat. And the players in Minnesota, the Cardinal players that were in Minnesota at that time, met after the game, and they decided they didn't want to have a parade. They didn't win the World Series. They didn't feel like they want to have a parade. So we got a phone call a couple of days after the Cardinals lost the World Series in '87 and said, hey, it was all set up. We were going to be over there, and they told us where we're going to be at and who we're going to be riding behind and everything. And they said, just to let you know, there's not going to be a parade. And I was like, oh, man, I was really looking forward to that because that was even something really, really special.
Mm-hmm. See, Coach,
but we weren't in a parade a little bit later on in Centralia, so that kind of worked out kind of fun too.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about the Centralia because they have a big Halloween parade every year, and I remember one time we were coming back from I think it was the Mules playoff football game last year, and I just remember trying to navigate my way through traffic because it was dark, it was rainy out, but they have a big Halloween parade, and so talk about that experience.
That was something that they called us, and they wanted us to be grand marshals of the parade, and they had some other grand marshals too. They had this is the fall of '87. Greg Mathews, who was a pitcher for the Cardinals at the time, and Tom Lawless. So we're there. We meet at this one spot and location, and then they feed us. They have a banquet there, like it's food, very informal. So we eat, and I remember talking to Mathews, and he and I, for some reason, kind of hit it off. We just talked a lot, and super nice guy. And Lawless was kind of standoffish. He didn't really, he didn't associate a whole lot. He brought his kid with him, and he was dressed up, and he spent a lot of time with him, which is okay. So anyway, Lawless had hit a home run in the '87 World Series, and it was quite, unexpected. So when he was there, I kind of walked up to him and I said, "Hey, making small talk. I said, what did it feel like to hit that home run in the World Series?" And he get very nonchalantly, he goes, "Oh, it just felt like any other home run I hit." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So we were talking a little bit. Yeah. We were talking a little bit. We were talking a little bit more, and he goes, "I got to run over here for you." So he left. He walked away. Well, Mathews come up, and he had heard him say something, and he goes, "What did he say to you?" And I'm like, when you ask him that, and I said, "Well, he told me it's like any other home run he hit." And he goes, "You only hit one." And he thought that was so funny, because Lawless is very nonchalant about it, and Mathews thought that was really funny. So he kind of ribbed him a little bit about it the rest of the night. But anyway, we had to leave to go get loaded up in the cars. Well, we had about a 3.5, 4 block walk that we had to go, and so they're telling us that, "Hey, you need to meet at this location." Well, Lawless is already gone. He's taken off. He's gone. I don't know who he went with, but Mathews looked at me, and Greg's like, "I don't know where to go." Well, I did. So we took off, and we're running through the crowd because we've got to get there because it's getting ready to start. And we're zigzagging through the crowd, running through everything. And people are like, "Hey, that's Greg Mathews. That's Greg Mathews." We're like, and he's "I can't sign autographs right now. I got to go." He's in a hurry. So we get there. And we go through the whole process of the parade and everything. And a few years later, several years later, actually, at the winter warm-up, Mathews is signing autographs. I thought, it'd be kind of neat to go through the line. He was free. And I thought, I'll go through the line and get him to sign a ball for me and get a chance to talk to him again, So I walk up to him, and I've got my ring on. I set it up there, and he looks at me. He looks down at the ball in my ring. He looks back at me again, looks back down again. And I told him the story. I said, "We were in a parade together one time." He goes, "Centralia, Illinois, Halloween parade. Lawless was there." And he said, "I was making fun of him for the home run story. And we had to run through that crowd and get to our location." I said, "That's it." He remembered the whole thing. It was so funny. But yeah, that's a funny memory too.
Coach, it just seems like you're like the Forrest Gump. The type of guy who just shows up, these Cardinal player connections and everything. I just throughout the years, it's crazy.
It's just I was just in the right place at the right time in '87 when that 3 millionth fan happened, and it just opened up some things. And I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, Mimi, opened up a lot of doors too, and I was able to meet a lot of people. He introduced me to Hank Aaron. And
yes.
Ernie Banks.
Oh yes, you talked about. I'm sorry, but you mentioned Hank Aaron, and I saw that photo of you that you posted on your Facebook page recently, where you're in your 20s and you have Hammer and Hank Aaron standing right next to you, and
yeah, it's fun. Just to talk to. As far as I'm concerned, Hank Aaron is still the all-time home run leader.
Yes,
he is. That's just how I feel. But it's just he's just a nice guy. We sit there and we talk and talk and talk, and there was nobody around, which is odd. That Hank Aaron and there and at this convention that we were at, and people were there walking around, and a few people will stop and say hi and get a picture or whatever, or autograph. And but it's just really odd that, I was able to do that and to talk to him for so long. And that was fun.
Well, Coach, I was going to say, I showed my folks that picture of you and Hank Aaron, and my mom was like a casual Braves fan. Like she was a big fan of Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine and Chipper Jones and those guys in the '90s. And I showed her the picture of you and Hank Aaron, and she stared at that photo for like 10 minutes, thinking, "Who's that?" I mean, I know who Marty is, but who's that guy right there, right next to him? And I finally, I gave him hints, Coach. I gave him hints, and he still didn't know who he was. I'm like, "Oh, this is Hank Aaron next to Marty Slover," and they let out the biggest, "You've got to be kidding me." So I was wondering, how did that all come about? I mean, you talked about how you were talking to Hank Aaron when there was no one around, but just want to know, how did that process go? Like of just meeting up with him and everything.
We were at a convention, and he was me, and took me and some other friends up there, and a lot of baseball stuff going on, and he was there. I say this, Hank Aaron, when he shook my hand, he has the biggest hands of any man I've ever shook hands with.
Really?
They were I mean, they were monster hands. His hands and his forearms and wrists were massive, and I can see where he would generate a lot of power from just the strength that he had in his hands. But he was just a gentle giant. He was just such a nice guy, and he loved baseball. He loved to talk baseball. He loved to talk to his fans. Hank Aaron could very easily have gone the other way, though. I mean, he had received a lot of racism in his life, threatening to break Babe Ruth's record and everything. And but he had kind of moved past some of that, where he wasn't bitter any longer. And people were accepting him because he was a true home run champ and everything. And I think he genuinely realized that we were interested in just talking to him about it and about being Hank Aaron, and he's just a nice guy.
I was going to ask, did you take him on in a home run hitting contest after you met up with him, or?
No. I don't think I stood much of a chance with that at all. That was a hammer. He was just, like I said, he was just a good guy.
I was wondering, did you ever meet Stan Musial at all?
Yes, several times. Good friend of mine. Actually, Stan signed a lot of autographs and stuff, and I got autographs that way. But a good friend of mine who was once again, connection, Mimi Alongi. Mimi had set me up with this guy. He ran a baseball card and baseball art store in I believe it was Manchester, Missouri. So his name was Ron Graham, not the same Ron Graham that coached football here, but Ron Graham, and he's retired now. But Mimi knew that I liked Nolan Ryan, and so he had a print over there, and he's like, "You need to go check this out." So I went over and was talking to him and everything, and I ended up buying it off of him and bought some other things too. Got to struck up a friendship with Ron. Well, right next door to Ron's office, and Ron knew that I was good friends with Mimi. He and Mimi, he knew that. So he I went over one day, and I go over there maybe once every summer or something. So anyway, he's like, "Hey, you golf?" I'm like, "No, I'm not a very good golfer at all." I said, "I've been maybe once in my life." I said, "I'm bad." I said, "I've really never picked the game up." I said, "I don't even own any golf clubs. I have no desire really to play right now because it's just not something I want to do." He goes, "Well, that's too bad." He said, "I was going to see if you want to come over maybe in a month or two." And he said, "I got a golf outing planned with Dick Zitzman." Well, Dick Zitzman was the office next door to him, was the guy that took care of all of the Stan Musial autographs that Stan would sign and send off. And he'd come in and sign for, a couple hours every day. I'm like, "Oh, that'd be kind of fun." He goes, "Well," he said, "you want to go?" And I said, "I don't know." He goes, "Well, I'll tell you what." He said, "Stan Musial's going to be there golfing with us too." And I said, "You got any extra clubs?" Because I'm planning, because I'm like, so anyway, we had it all set up to go. And then about that time, Stan had been having some problems with his hip. He wasn't feeble and elderly like he was right before, he had passed away and everything. And he had to have some hip surgery done, and wasn't able to go to golf that day. So the golf outing kind of got canceled. But I had an opportunity to go golf with Ron Graham and Dick Zitzman and Stan Musial and myself. And I would definitely have been the worst golfer there, without a doubt, but I would probably had more fun than all three of them put together.
Yeah, I would just be there like, look, guys, I'm horrible at golf, but I want to talk to you guys. I want to have some good conversations here.
Yeah. You just hit the ball, and I'll ride in the cart, and I'll talk. We'll talk, So, but it was. I was really looking forward to that, And like I said, it didn't happen, but it was just one of those things that, And I told Mimi about it, and Mimi's like, oh, that'll be a lot of fun. He said, you'll like that. Well, Mimi's health wasn't real good at that point in time, too. And so he wasn't able to go because I offered to take him over, too. He said, I still think I can make it. So, but it was that would have been a fun time.
Outside of the Cardinals, St. Louis has had a lot of great athletes. We talk about those that went on to the pros, and I want to go back to my Eastern Illinois University days for a moment. From 2012 to 2014, there was he played football, and I think baseball, don't quote me on that, but his name was Cameron Berra, and he was somehow in relation to Yogi Berra, because Yogi's from St. Louis, and I was wondering, did you ever meet Yogi? Did you ever get a chance to talk to him at all? Or
That's a funny question, because in '88, Yogi was assistant coach for the Houston Astros. They were in the National League. And the Astros were in town. Nolan Ryan, I went over and I thought Nolan was going to pitch that day. Well, something happened where he got bumped back a day and he wasn't pitching. I had brought Nolan Ryan's book with me and got him to sign it. Nolan was in the clubhouse and wasn't coming out because people were not signing. So one of his players was walking by and he saw the book and he goes, hey, he said, he's not coming up. But he said, would you like for me to take it down to the clubhouse and see if he'll sign it for you? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So he took it down and he signed it and brought the book back. But in the meanwhile, Yogi Berra was walking by and I had a program, Cardinal program, and I looked at him and said, hey, Yogi, you signed an autograph? He goes, can't do it right now. My back's kind of bothering me right now. He kind of made an excuse and walked off. And I looked at the guy that was with me and I'm like, oh, I guess he didn't want to talk to us. So, but he said, my back's kind of bothering me right now. He didn't, but yeah, it was funny. But back then you could go down to the players would come over and they would talk to you. You could watch a Cardinal take batting practice, and it wasn't like it is today where they're kind of alienated kind of from everybody. And I realize they want their privacy. People drive them crazy.
Sure. Yeah. Kind of like the security around and all that.
Yeah.
But Yogi again. But Cameron was a good athlete for us up at Eastern, and so when I saw that bio of him, the Berra, the last name just stood out to me, and then I looked up his bio and I saw that he was from St. Louis as well, and that's where some of Yogi's family was from too. That's where Yogi was born and all that. So I wondered if, since he was from St. Louis and obviously he's known for his time with the Yankees, I wondered if you had spent some time with him, you had any interactions with him at all.
No interactions with anybody like that. Like I said, all the stuff that people that I had interactions with was directly as a result of connections that I had with Mimi, and then of course the acquaintance that we had with Jack Buck. Jack,
yeah, talk about Jack for a moment.
Well, he was when that happened, we had a mutual friend, and he found out about that, and we got to talk and everything, and we became he kind of stepped out of the mode of being the broadcaster. He became stepped more personal, more in between us and everything. And before I left, that day he told me, he said, hey, if you ever come to the ball game, he said, put your name on a card, get it to the guard. He said, come on up to the booth. So we did. We went up to the booth. We didn't wear it out. We went up there, probably 5 or 6 times over the next few years. And it's always funny, we go up there, and I'd always try to find it where he was just about ready to come off the air. That way we could talk. So we went up one time and went in, and this actually happened a couple times when we were up there. But Ryan wasn't very old, and he would go up there with me, and we'd go in, and Jack would still be on the air during the game. Well, Shannon would come over and he'd see Ryan there. Well, up there where we were at, to the left of the KMOX booth in the old bush was a buffet table line, and they had it there for the media. They had everything. And Shannon would take Ryan in there and load him up on nachos and hot dogs and bring them in their sodas or whatever they had, and then he'd sit behind the booth there, kind of up on a little, like a table, snack bar type table, and he'd be eating. Jack would get off the air, and of course he loved kids, and he'd always look around to see where Ryan, and he'd say, "Where's the little guy at?" And anyway, he turned around, and he saw him up there, and he had nachos on his face, and he was just chowing down, and he'd look at Shannon, and Shannon would turn around and just kind of smile at him, and he's like, "You got me again," because he liked to take Ryan to the buffet. But yeah, he was really just a class act. I remember one time he'd done the start of the game, and we got up there kind of late, and he'd done the start of the game, and he told me, he said, "I got to go down and do this interview." He said, "Stick around." Well, I'm going to stick around. So we stayed there, and he told the security guy, he said, he said, "I'll be right back." So he went down and did the start of the game, came back up, and we left. And as we left, there was an elevator just around the outside the booth, and we rode the elevator down with him. And when we got in there, there was an elderly lady in there, and he called her by name. And we got to the bottom of the elevator, opened up on the bottom floor, and we're going to walk with Jack to his car. And he reached in his pocket, and he pulled out a $100 bill and handed it to the lady. And she's like, "Oh, Mr. Buck, you don't have to do that. You got a kid in school, don't you? Don't you have a kid in college?" And she said, "Yeah." And he said, "You need a tip." So he gave her $100. And I thought that was really nice of him to do. And I've heard people say that did that many, many times, but I actually saw him do it. And other times we would go up there and we'd walk down. And I'd say, if we went up earlier in the game, he'd say, "Are you sticking around after the game?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Well, meet me at my car." And he said, "We'll talk." And we met at his car a few times. And once time we walked to the car, and we were walking there, and Ryan was not very old. And he had his Cardinal hat on. And we walked over there. And Jack's like, we were talking about the game and everything. And he walked to the back seat of his car, and he had a 4-door car, and he opened it up, and there was a big box in there, and it was just full of candy. And he looked at Ryan and he says, "Take your hat off." But Ryan took his hat off and kind of held him. He said, "Hold it out." So he held his hat out, and Jack reached in there and got like 2 big handfuls of candy and just threw in the back of his cap. He said, he looked at me and he goes, "Don't tell your mom and dad I gave you all this candy." And he kind of laughed. But he just was a really good guy. And once we made that connection, we had that connection, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go over to his visitation, because he treated us really, really well when we were over there, and he's just a special person.
We were talking about this before starting the podcast, but you were actually went to his visitation and talked about how all that came about.
Well, I was kind of torn whether I was going to go or not. I wanted to, and I finally decided, yeah, I think I will. Well, Mimi, his health was, like I said, was not good, and he knew Jack, and he's like, "Hey, will you do something for me?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, what is it?" And he said, "Will you go to the visitation as my proxy?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'll go." So I went, and he said, "I'm going to call you on the way." So I got about halfway to St. Louis, and my phone rang. It was me, and he goes, "Hey, I want you to meet," and I can't remember the guy's name right now. He said, "Meet this guy. He's going to he wants to meet you. He wants to do an interview." And I'm like, "He wants to interview me?" And he goes, "You're standing in my place." He said, "Do this for me." I was like, "Okay." So went over. I got there. I got parked. I parked in stadium parking west. I had to park on the very top because it was full. And my phone rang, and it's this guy. And he told me who he was. I can't remember the name of the TV station right now. Anyway, I was like, "Okay." He said, "Meet me at the left field wagon gate." I'm like, "Okay." So I walk around the outfield, and there are people lined up. I mean, the line is massive. And I walk in, and I don't know where in the world this guy's at. Well, pretty soon my phone rings again. He says, "Hey, come on inside." He said, "I'm standing right inside the wagon gate." So I walk in, and there's him, and he's got a TV guy with a camera. He goes, "We're going to go down here." And he said, "I'd like to ask you some questions and conduct a little interview here about a Jack Buck story that you have." And so we went down, and we actually went in the Cardinal dugout, and he conducted the interview in there. We talked a little bit, and I told him a different story that we had about when we were talking and everything. And did an interview, and then, like I said, the visitation, and it's really weird because there's probably 3, 4, 5,000 people going through the line, and nobody said a word. It was just total silence.
Could have heard a pin
They were
drop.
just walking by. Yeah, it was very, very, it's just very, it's awesome, as far as the respect that he had, and everything. And there's a lot of Cardinal players that were walking around too. They were in uniform because they had a game that day. And they were walking around, and they were just like, very pretty down. Everybody's kind of in the clubhouse there. They're kind of down and stuff. But it was just, it was just a really neat experience. And I got to go there for Mimi. And then I had to come back home. And when I came back home, he'd called me on the way and had to give a full report of everything that happened. He wanted to know.
Yeah.
So I told him everything that happened, and he thanked me. But he I still talk to his wife quite frequently. I mean, I called her just a few nights ago and gave her a call, and we talk. And she's 94 years old now, and it's a super nice lady too. Just an amazing family.
I remember the passing of Jack Buck, but also remember that he actually did his 9/11 poem, and that was moving, and that was just months before he passed away.
Yeah, Jack was a really creative person. He wrote poetry, and he loved anything to do with poetry. He loved it, and he was good at it. And that poem that he wrote was, like you said, I think the word was moving, and it was.
Coach, we've we've talked a lot of baseball here, a lot of stories. One thought I had in mind was when I was a kid growing up in the 90s, obviously the big story was, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, the home run, the season home run battle between those two. As a fan, that was a big deal because I just remember everybody talking about it when I was a kid.
That was something, I've never met McGwire. I know a lot of people like Mark McGwire, but I just felt like that I felt like he and Sosa were allowed to become bigger than the game. And we didn't win when he was hitting all these home runs as far as go to the World Series, so I just felt like, and I'm not taking anything bad. I think that they probably saved baseball because we were coming off of a strike. They probably saved baseball for that time period, but I just never could really get into Mark McGwire. Now I have heard stories about him, some of the things that he's done that have been really, really nice things, nice acts of kindness and things like that. So I can't really say anything bad about him as a person because I don't know, but I've heard really nice things about him. I just know that time that happened, I just felt like he was a little bit bigger than the game, and me, I'm team more concept than anything.
Oh yeah. Well,
I will tell you a funny story that Whitey
go ahead.
did. Howard Johnson was a switch hitter for the Mets back in '87, and he was hitting home runs like crazy. I think he ended up like 36 home runs in '87. He was a switch hitter and third baseman. And I can't repeat what Whitey said. I was within earshot, and I heard him say this. But the next day, after he hit the home run, he hit a home run against the Cardinals. They took the bat, and they were going to confiscate it, have it tested. Well, Whitey would not let it go down into the umpire's equipment room because he was afraid that they would take it. So he made them take it and tape it to the backstop at Busch Stadium. So it was hanging there, and I'll repeat what he said, but he questioned Howard Johnson's heritage.
Oh gosh!
he didn't have some very unkind words to say because he said he basically accused him of cheating, And that just went right through him, And Fred Kuhlman even told me the same story. So I went that blankety blank is cheating, and all he said, and he was mad when he said it. He was not happy. He was mad. You can see fire. Fred Kuhlman was like 81 years old when he told me the story, and there was fire coming out of his eyes.
One thing about Whitey we haven't talked about yet, but to see someone from Southern Illinois, from New Athens, I get it mixed up. That's where he's born at, not far from St. Louis, and to see him, and like if I butcher his last name, Coach, just smack me in the face because I should know it. But like Red Schoendienst,
Red Schoendienst.
Schoendienst. I'm sorry. I've heard it multiple ways, but like those guys from Southern Illinois, and you look at the impact they made in Cardinals baseball. What an amazing story! I mean,
Well, Whitey used to skip class and go watch the Cardinals at the old Sportsman's Park.
yeah,
He's told that story many, many times. Red Schoendienst actually went to St. Louis and slept on a park bench one night in order to try out for the Cardinals.
yeah.
And I've heard him. Now he hasn't. I mean, that story's been told like at the winter warm up, and he would tell that story, And I'm like, that takes a lot of commitment, to do something like that, But those guys, it was a different era back then, and
He also had that. He also had an injury to his eye too. Red did a really severe eye injury with a nail. Hit his eye, and then he became he kind of changed his batting stance and went the opposite direction. And they say the rest is history. And he was also manager for a time.
Yeah, he was. He just, And I had a 1946 Cardinal schedule, I think is what it was, and Olin. My daddy actually found it at an auction, and he bought it for me because he knew I liked that stuff. And Red had actually played on that team, so he was signing autographs. He was signing autographs over at St. Louis one time, and I knew he was going to be over there, so I went on over, and I had this with me, and I still got it. And when I walked up and I handed it to him, he looked at me, and he just lit up. He goes, "Where in the world did you find this?" And I said, "Well, my dad found it at an auction or a flea market, actually." And he's like, "Well, you got to tell me the story." So I told him the story about my dad finding it and getting it and buying it and everything. And he's like, "That is something else." He said, "I haven't seen one of these in ages." And I said, "Well, I brought it over here for you to sign." I said, "If you don't care." And he goes, I'll sign that gladly. And he just signed his name on it, and I've still got it. But he just really, when I laid that down on the table for him, he just lit up. I mean, it was just like somebody just turned on a switch on him. And sadly,
awesome.
a few short months later, he started to fall ill and wasn't with us much longer.
Oh wow! So that was only just a few years ago. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Coach, I tell you what, this has been awesome. Has there been any? Is there any other St. Louis Cardinals player, manager that you'd like to talk about? Like you've had interactions with, conversations with that maybe you haven't told yet, because I know you have a lot of connections.
Well, me and another friend of mine, actually, my wife's cousin, went over to. We used to go over to the ball game, Busch Stadium, and we'd leave at 7:00 in the morning and just hang out at the ballpark, just walking around, And we talked to people, and back then it was safe to do that. And we just kind of talked to people and everything, Well, we'd stay until the game was over, and we knew where the players came out and everything, the old Busch. And I told him, I said, let's wait on Russa to come out. So Russa came out, and we were kind of standing there and stuff, and I had a program, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, would you sign my program?" He said, "Yeah." So we talked baseball. He stood there and talked to us for 10 minutes, just me and Brian and Russa. And Brian goes, "Hey, good win today." He said, "It's a good day." And Tony didn't miss a beat, and Russa goes, "It's always a good day when you win." Very intense individual. You could pick that up real fast.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "It's always a good day when you win." So he liked to win. That's one thing that he liked to do, and I'd have to say he's pretty good at it.
Well, Coach, I don't think I've ever told you this, but I was not a fan of baseball growing up. I just had a disdain for it because I remember playing it in PE, North Side and Center Street, and I just wasn't good at it. I just didn't see the excitement with it, and it wasn't until I started working in radio and when I would be walking around I was working at WFIW WOKZ radio, and I would, walk around. I worked the evening shift out there, and I would just kind of walk around the rooms and do duties and everything. And Cardinals baseball be on OKZ, and I would just be listening a little bit. It was back in 2011, and there was one name that kept popping up. It just seemed like I would hear Mike Shannon and John Rudy mentioned was Lance Berkman. And so whenever they kept talking about Lance Berkman this, Lance Berkman that, and then like I just did some research on him. I researched the team, and it wasn't too long after that. Like, I don't want to leave WOKZ control room. I want to keep listening to Cardinals baseball all night, and I just got hooked onto it because of that way. And so, but that was the year they won the World Series, of course. And but Berkman, he was the one who really got my interest in baseball. If you look at it from a MLB player perspective.
Yeah, probably would have won the World Series in 11 if he hadn't been here. I mean, he got a big hit in Game 7 that if he doesn't get that hit, we don't score a run. And
Game 6, actually, Coach, it was Game 6.
And Game 6, and so Freese never gets a chance to bat. So if he doesn't get up and get the hit, things could be very, very different. But I met him one time, and he always got a smile on his face. I mean, the guy's just a happy guy, and he's one of those players. The thing about a lot of Cardinal guys, players and stuff, I've been very, very fortunate to have a lot of doors opened up for me through people that knew people who knew people, and I just was young enough and hung around those people and got a chance to meet some people. But then, the Cardinal players are all kind of have one thing in common, and that is they're all people, and they appreciate the fans.
Yes.
And if they don't, they get rid of them. Gary Templeton, for example, wasn't a fan. He wouldn't do with the fans. They got rid of him. Currently here lately, Tyler O'Neill wasn't real great with the fans, and he's gone. Players like that don't stick around very long. I struck up a friendship too in '88 with one of the Cardinal relief pitchers. His name was Steve Peters, and every time I would go to the game, I would stop by and talk to him, and he'd come over and he'd see me. And he and Steve Lake were two guys that always came over and talked to us. Steve Lake was a catcher for the Cardinals, a backup catcher, and Brian was just infatuated with Steve Lake. He was, he put on catcher's gear. He's left-handed. And I said, you're never gonna catch. You're left-handed. Yeah, but I like Steve Lake. So he'd get my umpire equipment out and he'd put it on. He'd act like a catcher. And we're at the game one time, and it's a Saturday, and Steve Lake's down the bullpen, and our seats are over there, and I'm talking to him, and I said, hey, I got a 6-year-old kid that thinks you're just about it. And he laughed, and and everything, and he goes, well, tell me more. So I said, well, I told him the story, and he goes, when you come to the game next? I said, well, actually, he's coming with me tomorrow. He goes, you gonna sit in the same seats? Yep, sure am. He goes, okay. Well, next day we're there, and I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm sitting there in our seats, and Ryan's up on the edge of his seat looking, watching. They're taking pictures of warming up and batting practice and stuff. And Lake looks at me and kind of nods. I'm like, something's up. So he leaves, he comes back, he's coming back, he's carrying his bat. And he walks up and he sets the bat on the top of the rail of the first row there, and he looks at Ryan, he goes, you like to have that? Ryan couldn't even speak. He's like, shook his head, yes. He couldn't even talk. He's just in awe. He gave him his bat, and and I thanked him for it, and everything. But that was something that they're all the same. Those guys are very personal. They have families too. Another story, not even a Cardinal, but Bob Ojeda. I don't remember him or not. He was a pitcher with the Mets.
No, I don't think I do. No.
He was involved in the boating accident that he was with Cleveland. And there's a couple of guys got killed in a boating accident one year. And then not too long after that, he was doing some work in his yard, and he cut the tip of his finger off of the hedges. And he's a pitcher. So he'd had some serious things that he had to overcome. Well, anyway, the Mets were taking BP, and the pitchers had to shag. They have to shag balls. But he was in left center field, and we were sitting in our seats and kind of kicked back. And Ryan's up to the next to the front of the row there, and he's got his glove on. He's watching everything. I see Ojeda walking across from center field because the Mets are done taking BP, and he's got a ball in his hand. He's taking it, throwing his glove. He's walking over. And I'm like, he's looking at Ryan. So sure enough, he walks over here, sets the ball up. He talks to him and says something to him. And I get up, after he talks to him for a few seconds, I walk over to him and I thanked him for coming over and doing that because he didn't have to. He goes, I got a little boy at home the same age. And he said, I'm kind of missing him right now. And he said, he reminded me of him. So he just gave him a ball.
Wow.
So there's a lot of nice guys they're just like everybody else. They just are a little bit more talented than we are as far as baseball's concerned.
Wow.
So there's some nice guys out there that do nice things for people.
Agreed. I know that they're active even with charities, like Barnes Jewish Hospital over in St. Louis, for example. I know that the players have made, trips to like the cancer clinics and all that. They have charity exhibition games, and I think that's great. I think it's great to also have that spirit of the community instilled in them.
Well, the guy that's the ringleader now and all that stuff is Matt Holliday.
Yes.
Matt Holliday does a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people don't know about, and has for years. I know there was just a true story that was told to me by a guy in the front office of the Cardinals that I used to be friends with, or was friends with. He's retired now. That he said that Matt Holliday hit a home run in Chicago. Well, actually, back up. He went to Children's Hospital. This little girl had asked him, said she would hit a home run for him, and he said, "I'll do my best. I'll do my best." Well, as luck would have it, he hit a home run. Well, what do they do in Wrigley Field when they hit a home run? Now, when the opposition hits a home run, what do they do?
Oh,
with the
Coach,
ball?
you put me on the spot.
They throw it back.
Yes,
They chuck
yes.
it back on the field. Yeah. So here he is. He's hit a home run. They throw it back on the field, and he gets the ball. So he's got the ball. So they fly back in. That was on a Sunday. This guy told me. He said he hit it on a Sunday. He flew back in on a Sunday. And where do you think that he went, him and his wife, before he ever went home?
They went to go see a little girl.
Children's Hospital to give that little girl that ball.
Yep.
That's a true story. That was told to me by a guy that was in the Cardinal front office for a long time. And I was like, are you sure? He goes, I swear. He said he did that. So, and then later on, I did hear that story from other people that it snuck out. But he didn't want it to be known. He wanted to do it very discreetly. But some of the nurses there let it out. They told what happened. And they said he does stuff like that a lot. So
I was thinking, like, I'm glad that the ball just didn't go into the ivy, because I was thinking of the ivy as soon as you asked me that question.
Yeah. But yeah, they when you hit a home run at Wrigley Field, your opposition, they're gonna throw it back out there, and he took that opportunity to latch onto it, so he got it. So.
All right, well, Coach, I tell you what, we've already gotten over an hour into this podcast, and I'll tell you, let's end it with some rapid fire. We can talk baseball a lot here, but I guess some rapid fire questions for you to wrap up this podcast. So before you exit the listening lounge, that is. So you don't know what these questions are because I want it to be a surprise. So they're pretty simple, but rapid fire questions. Question number 1: mountains or beach?
What?
Mountains or beach? Which one would you rather go to?
I can't understand what you said. What?
So, would you rather go to the mountains or would you rather go to the beach?
Oh, beach.
Okay. Cake or pie?
Pie.
Okay. Favorite season? What's your favorite season of the year?
Spring.
I figured that. We talked about Yogi Berra earlier, but he was known for his yogiisms. And so, if you had a Slover-ism, we'll say, what would it be?
Well, I stole one from Yogi. Well, I stole one of these from Yogi, and I'd always used to do it, and I did it a lot of times. You may even remember when I did it when you played basketball for me, but I'd always tell the guys to, hey, we're going to line up alphabetically according to height.
Well, hey, Coach, I was short back then, so I would have been one of the last.
That's something that he Yogi said. I always thought that was funny. And people look at you like, do what? So, but my practice is I like to have fun too. We got to work down, but I also like to have fun too. But
well, I was short back then. Okay, the last one though. This is one that I thought of, but since I had you as a teacher in 7th grade, and you had a long teaching career as well, but during your teaching career, if you were given the chance to teach a course, like a class or subject, really, that you were always interested in, but never got to teach it, what is that course and why?
Oh boy, that's a tough question because I love history. Gosh, Um, I don't know. I mean, it's something to do with history, I'm sure, because it's one of my favorite classes that I taught. I mean, I love teaching about World War II because I had three uncles that fought in the war, and I always can relate to that. But I'd say probably something to do with history.
Okay, so kind of like American history, I guess, or
Yeah,
World War II.
American history. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, American history.
because I'm trying to remember what all you taught. I know you taught social studies. I think was one. Trying to think what else.
Well, I got endorsed in several different subjects because I had lost my teaching job because they closed the school down in Wayne City and
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't have the credentials needed. So I made sure that when that happened, I was never going to happen again. So I made sure in the summertime I would take additional courses to make myself eligible to teach science and math. And I was actually an English major and a history major. So I had all those areas that I could teach so that I was very flexible and everything. So I taught a little bit of everything.
So my question is, speaking of Wayne City here, but where does Sims come into play? I wonder about that.
That was my first job that I ever had. I was actually offered a job in St. Louis. I was offered a job in um, Woodlawn. Weber Township offered me a job, and then Sims, Wayne City Unit District, they offered me a job. And when Fairfield came into play a little bit later on, but when Sims offered me the job, I'm like, okay, I have some comfort level there because I know people and everything. So I went there, and we just had just a great community to work in. The people there were so nice, and I mean, the cooks there were fantastic. I probably gained 15, 20 pounds the first year I taught there because they would make me pie. They found out that I like lemon pie, and they would make me lemon pies about once every month. And my pants got to where they wouldn't fit very well, and so I had to kind of cut back on that a little bit. But just an amazing place to work. The athletes that we had there were incredible. I mean, it's a small school, but my goodness, we had some amazing athletes that were there. Uh, one of the girls that I had, the Leanne Freeland, I coached her for 3 years, and she was just a joy to coach as far as talent is concerned. But there were so many great people there and athletes and everything. So I really enjoyed that. And when I closed that school down, obviously I lost my job because I didn't have enough seniority, and the interviews started coming through. Um, I had chances to go to several different places, and I was playing softball with one of my teammates was Steve Baker, and Steve's like, "Hey, there's an opening at Fairfield." He said, "Let's. I want you to think about it." So it wasn't much longer, and I know he put in a good word, and I got a phone call from the superintendent and asked me to come over and interview, and pretty much hired me on the spot. So that's how I wound up here.
I was wondering, so because Sims, well, when I was there at the school for a party a while back, this is back maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and they had those photos there, and I was looking at the photos, and I saw that photo of you, and I was like, oh, there's no way, and I immediately
It's me.
I sent
It's me.
I sent the photos to you, and I'm like, Coach Sims, the
Yep.
Jets, really? I had
Yep.
no idea.
Yeah. It's a great school to work in. A great community, great teachers. The administration was fantastic, and the athletes, the kids were phenomenal. And I still run into some of them here today. And we still reminisce about it. And it's just a great little community to work in. It's a small school, but they would do anything for you.
Well, Coach, I tell you what, man, this has been a good conversation here about baseball and teaching because I wanted to talk about teaching for a little bit too, since you were an educator for years and you're still coaching to this day. I'm just wondering, how many years did you teach, and how many years have you been coaching now? Because it's got to be. I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna say, man. Let's go with 30 years teaching and 42 years coaching. I hope I'm right.
You're pretty close. I taught for 34 years,
Ooh.
and this is my 39th year of actually coaching, and I've coached baseball, softball, basketball. Got out of coaching basketball, 32 years of coaching basketball. Of course, I was at the high school and for a while, and I didn't. Somebody asked me after I quit coaching, they said, "How many wins do you have?" And I said, "Well, actually had looked it up before I retired,
Mm-hmm.
and I had 484. And they said, well, why didn't you stay a few more years to get to 500? And I said, well, because it was time. Basketball, had kind of run its course with me, and it was just time for me to step down. And just like I stepped down from baseball, I knew it was time. I had a couple hundred wins there in baseball, and I just knew it was time. It was time to step down. And when the job opened up here at Frontier in 2015, and they offered me the head baseball job, I actually turned it down because I didn't have the contacts that I used to have. And
Right.
they offered me the softball job, and I was coaching softball at the time, knew people, Coach Ellis and I knew a lot of people, and we kind of jumped in and thought, yeah, let's do that. I'm going to do that. So I took it, and we started the program, and of course the health issues came. That's a few years ago, where I still wanted to coach. My mind was saying, you still want to coach, and I do. And your body was saying, you got to slow down. So I slowed down. I still coach. I still do the things that I enjoy doing. I still recruit. I still help with the coaching of the team and the hitting and the strategy involved. And it's just a lot of fun that I really enjoy. And I love meeting people and talking about the community, the college, and expanding that program. And but yeah, 39 years of coaching and 34 years in the classroom.
Wow, I I was surprised I came close after all. But I'm gonna say this: you made a big impact on my life, because when I remember junior high, and one of the things I remember was I've told people this story. I remember one of the teams. Again, this is back when I played for you, Coach. But one of the teams that seems like we could not beat was Salem. I don't know why, but Salem was that one team that we just could not beat. And I remember we came so close to beating them. I think we lost by 3 points, I think. And I remember you told us in the locker room post game that you asked us how many times as a coach, you were able to get wins over Salem, and you only held out just one hand, and that was it. And you said you gave us the next day off. You're like, hey guys, because you guys played so hard, no practice tomorrow, just enjoy the day off. And that's one of the biggest memories that I have in terms of locker room wise, just after a game. It just seemed like that memory stuck with me over the years.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. We were able to handle Salem to a certain extent at home. We had trouble with them away. We had trouble with Olney. We could beat Olney at home. Had trouble with them away. I think I had one win against Salem away, and I think we beat Olney once in those 30-some years. And I remember both wins. We had Salem beat the year that my team won state. We had them beat that year, and a kid hit a shot from about 35 or 40 feet at the buzzer to beat us, and we got beat by. It was a tie game. We got beat by 3. So, but there were some real battles back, on those teams and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. I missed the competition, but man, I don't miss those bus rides at all. So.
Well, Coach, I tell you what I don't miss, though. I loved playing for you, but I just do not miss the man killers at all you made us run. I tell you what, man, I was gassed. I was just tired, and I just remember doing those man killers, and it was just I was tired to run up and down the floor. I was like, please, 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 let's just shoot free throws or just work on shooting or shell drill or whatever. I don't know, but.
Well, the thing about those killers is they got you in shape. They got you ready to play. And whenever one of the things that especially I always told my assistant coaches, I said we got to put pressure on in practice, and it's good pressure. It's not mean pressure. Some coaches coaching are mean. It's good pressure. You got to put that pressure on so that when the game is on the line and you're playing, you can handle it. And you've got to be in shape. You've got to have your legs, and you got to be able to be mentally tough. And that was one of the things that we always emphasized, and Coach Warren, when he was with my assistant coach, and even Ryan, when Ryan was my assistant coach, we talked a lot about being prepared. And I always thought maybe there might be a team that might be better than we were, but nobody was going to be better prepared than we were. So we went into the games with that philosophy, and that won us a lot of ball games, because when it got tough, you always had the extra gear you could kick back in and get going and push yourself.
And then the other memory I'll share with you is I remember making that 3-pointer at the Summersville shootout, and it was against Triton Westland. I remember that. And the one thing I remember was I didn't even see the basket at all, Coach. I'm just going to admit to you right now, I didn't even see the rim. I just fired away, and I remember this Triton Westland defender just coming in from the right side like a flying ninja out of nowhere. He tried to block my shot. I got the ball up just in time, and I was making corner threes at a pretty good clip. So I'd be shooting hoops at the park, and the same way in the gym, I'd just be making these corner threes like they were nothing. It was just like, I remember sometimes we would lift up shots, and you would say butter, and it would just go right in. And so that was a butter shot. And I remember in the locker room, Gabe Trotter gave me $3 and said, well, D, I tell you what, you score any more points, we'll give you some more money. And I was like, all right. And so, but man, I just remember making that shot. It was the only 3 points I ever scored, but man, I'm still proud of those 3 points. So,
well, and I tell you what, whenever that shot went in, the people that most excited, D, was your teammates on the bench. They were jumping up and hollering. I remember that shot, and they were jumping up and hollering and everything. So they liked that too. They were very supportive.
Well, I tell you what, I know they didn't create like an internet buzz because I know like some friends were on MSN Messenger back then in the day, and it was like, guys, D made points. He got a shot. He scored. Anyway, it was crazy. And then I got fouled in a game. I can't remember which opponent it was, but I remember I was working on my free throw shooting, and the referee walks up to me and he says, hey man, what's up with your free throw form? I said, what are you talking about? I'm ready, and back then my free throw form sucked, to be honest, but I missed both free throws, and then I was like, okay, forget that. I'm not using that form again. But so anyway, I had to adjust and adapt at the park after that. But anyway, just memories, Coach. Good times, and I still see some of those guys, those teammates. I see Wooder. You talked about Jeremy earlier. I saw Patrick Ewing the other day. Not the NBA player Patrick Ewing. We mean the Patrick Ewings from Fairfield. But
great athlete.
Yes. Athlete. Yeah, we had a good team back then. I just feel like we should have got more wins, to be honest. But that's just my opinion.
It was probably your coach's fault.
Yeah. Okay, Coach. I could blame you for something at least once. Those good times. Coach, hey man, this has been a great podcast. I'm going to let you go here, but thanks for what you've done for me in my life. When I moved back here in 2016, when I moved back to Fairfield, I didn't know. I knew some people in town. I knew some people like friends and family who would have my back. And ever since 2016, ever since I moved back home, over the past few years especially, you've been an inspiration to me. You've been an encouragement to me. We've had good conversations about faith, about the Christian walk of life, but also athletics in general. And whenever I see you, I always try to give you a hug because you mean a lot to me. And so I want to say you've been a positive influence in my life, and I thank you for that. So,
well, yeah, I appreciate that very much, and that makes me feel really good because that's what it's all about. As a coach, that's what it's all about right there. So. Yeah, that means a lot to me, D.
All right, Coach. Well, thanks very much for sitting with me on the imaginary couch for the Listening Lounge podcast, where it's been raining outside, but obviously great conversations about baseball. Coach, I'd like to interview you again at some point down the road.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, like I said, I've just been very blessed and very fortunate, and doors have opened for me, and it's just it's fun, and good luck with your podcast and everyththing. You do a great job at the college on the Bobcat Nation. I know the girls appreciate it. I know I appreciate it. I know the parents and everybody appreciates that a great deal too, because a lot of people can't get to the park and watch their kids play, and they get a chance to do that. So that's something that they really appreciate, and thank you for that.
Well, Coach, one of these days, if you guys ever get a triple play again, I hope I know what a triple play is, because that one you had early in the season, I didn't even know it was a triple play until like moments later. I should have been more ready than that, but
they happen quick. That's actually the second one. That's actually the second one we've turned. We turned one in 2019, and it was pretty exciting too. So they are exciting, when that happens. So.
All right. Well, Coach, thanks very much for joining me here. And like I said, take care, and we'll talk to you again, all right?
All right. Thank you.
That was Coach Marty Slover, the assistant coach for Frontier Community College Bobcats softball team, longtime educator, longtime coach, great friend of mine. And so that wraps up this first episode of the Listening Lounge. Again, you can find it on RJ on the Air YouTube channel, along with the Listening Lounge podcast YouTube channel. Also find it on Spotify, and also like us on Facebook at The Listening Lounge. For Marty Slover, I'm Derek Dunn. Thanks very much for tuning in. And again, The Listening Lounge, where we unravel stories and ignite conversations one ear at a time. So long, and thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next edition of the Listening Lounge podcast.